it mean to be a movie producer? More specifically, what exactly does a movie producer do? I'm Elysabeth Alfano, host of the Dinner Party podcast on WGNplus.com, where the best conversations happen over dinner. Movie producer and CEO of Oddlot Entertainment, Gigi Pritzker, joins me in the WGN Studios today. Over food from my favorite Lula Cafe, Gigi and I dish about the movie biz. A bit more about Gigi. Gigi Pritzker was born in Chicago into the prestigious Pritzker family. While living in Bhutan for a year abroad, she produced a documentary film with the BBC, which hooked her on the art of filmmaking and producing. In 2001, she began Oddlot Entertainment, a film production and financing company. Based in Los Angeles and Chicago, Oddlot's past releases include Jon Stewart's directorial debut, Rosewater, Ivan Reitman's Draft Day, starring Kevin Costner, the highly anticipated adaptation of the sci-fi novel Ender's Game, the directorial debut of Academy Award-winning writers Jim Rash and Nat Faxon's The Way, Way Back, the critically acclaimed Drive, starring Ryan Gosling, and Rabbit Hole, the 2010 Academy Award-nominated film starring Nicole Kidman. In addition to film production, Gigi also develops and produces live stage productions through her company, Relevant Theatricals. Maybe you've heard of a little something called $1 Million Quartet, the Tony Award-winning long-running show. Yes, that's Gigi Pritzker. Now that Gigi is back in Chicago as the headliner for Industry Days as part of the Chicago International Film Festival, I wanted to treat her to food from one of my favorite restaurants. Lula Cafe in Logan Square holds a special place for me because long before there were celebrity chefs showing off this and showing off that, there was Jason Hamill. I featured Jason Hamill's cuisine on my show last week, but I have to say I can't get enough. Hamill is a self-taught chef who has been doing farm-to-table since 1999 on Kedzie Avenue before anyone was trying to make it a marketing pitch. And Jason's dedication to small farm and humanely treated livestock is sincere, committed, and the food is outstanding. And that's why I wanted to have it for dinner with Gigi Pritzker. Sure, Gigi could probably dine at any restaurant in the world, but sometimes the best dishes, probably much like the best films, are created by simply using the highest quality ingredients. Today, I've ordered us a spinach and endive salad with apple, pecorino, hempseed, and buttermilk dressing. I've also ordered us beet bruschetta marinated in kale with smoked pecans, shaved red onions, and whipped goat cheese. And we've got a chickpea sweet potato tagine with green harissa, fennel, pickled golden raisins, marinated beets with dill, and spicy coleslaw. So sit tight. Our food is ready, and I'm going to set the table. After a quick word about podcasts, I'll be right back with movie producer Gigi Pritzker. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, The Dinner Party with Elysabeth Alfano, on iTunes. Just search for The Dinner Party, or if SoundCloud is your thing, you can find me there too by searching for The Dinner Party. Subscribe and you'll never have to hunt for great, engaging interviews again. They'll just land on your computer or your iPhone every time a new podcast comes out. So subscribe now to the Dinner Party podcast with me, Elysabeth Alfano, because the best conversations really do happen over dinner. Gigi Pritzker, thanks for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
So we've got all this great food from Lula Cafe. These beets are just amazing.
Absolutely.
You know, I think when you're in LA, my vision is that everybody has a personal chef and that the best food on the planet is there because you have things growing all year round. Unlike us, we're about to go into the season of brown. So I wonder, is the food better in LA?
I'm a Chicagoan.
Yeah,
and
so
I
I
actually
know
live
this.
here.
Oh, you still live here?
I do. Actually, I have been working in LA for 15 years, maybe more, and have always kind of been a commuter because I'm a Chicagoan. But recently, I became roommates with my oldest daughter, who is living out there and working.
How fun is that?
Not only do we not have a personal chef, she is a really bad shopper, so our fridge is usually empty.
Oh, you're kidding. Wow, well then stick with me because I know the good chefs. So when you're on set, I'm just curious, do you have someone making food for you all the time or do you pack your own snacks whenever you have to run around?
On set, I used to be a line producer, and I know full well that the way to make everybody happy and reduce the amount of tension on a set is food. So to me, the caterer is super important, and we always try and do not only good catering, but options for lots of different, food choices.
Right, because there are so many food personalities, I'll say, now.
I have to say, one of my first jobs, I was a PA. And it was a commercial, and I went to school in California, and I moved to New York to work, and I was a PA on commercials, and one of my first jobs was I was craft services, which is not the catering, it's the crap basically that everyone snacks on. And we ran into overtime, and they were like, Gigi, you got to go get pizzas for everybody. So I was like, okay, fine. So I ordered 12 vegetarian pizzas. And the Teamsters absolutely eviscerated me on that one. And so I learned my lesson about pizza.
Yeah, and it's hard to please everyone now because everyone is so dead set on what they like. It's funny how emotional food is for people.
Totally. Absolutely.
Well, so I would love for you to walk me through, really, the day in the life of a movie producer, because I know on my tiny, tiny, small digital and cable TV show, people often say to me, oh, you just must walk up on stage and start talking to people. So the disparity between what it really takes to do that tiny little thing to what people think it is huge. And I imagine that it's even worse for your large position of putting together an entire movie. So walk me through a day in the life of a movie producer.
Wow. It's the thing I love about producing is it's so eclectic. So every day is different. There's really, I'm sure it's the same with you, right? Whatever the issue is that day, you face that issue and you have to deal with it. So to me, it's also a sequencing issue, right? So we are not just doing one film. We'll be in pre-production on a few, or we'll be developing scripts, or we'll be in post on another. So there's a variety of places you are along the chain, if you will, at any one time. And so it's a mix of solving the crisis of the moment or putting out the fire that is raging at that moment and looking ahead and trying to plot the next move on another project, or you're looking at notes to give to a writer for something you're in development on. So there's such a variety of ways in which you're engaged with different projects at different times.
I always think a good producer sort of has a split personality because they're hyper focused on the moment, and then they're also very focused on the future, a completely different project. But and not to belabor this too much, but I think people really don't know exactly what a producer does. So maybe what are some of the job descriptions, let's say, that you have that could be on your list at any one day?
You're 100% right. Nobody does. And the other thing that's really interesting I've noticed is none of us really know how someone else produces. So how you produce is very particular to you. And I was thinking a lot about this recently. So as a director, for instance, you're on other people's sets and you learn how to direct and what your style is. And directors sometimes are actors, directors, or some are more technical. But because you're kind of on stage doing what you do in front of lots of people, people know your style. We're very much independent in a vacuum, us producers, and you don't necessarily know what someone else's style is or how you do your job. You evolve into your job over time, I think.
One of the things I like about that is the creativity behind the job. And I don't think anybody really realizes that. But as a producer, I'm guessing if you're going to be looking at scripts and then developing scripts and finding the right talent to match that script and dealing with that particular talent's personality, and then all the business aspects of it, it actually takes a very creative spirit.
Absolutely. I think it takes a huge amount of creativity. It takes an enormous amount of tenacity and focus through long periods of time. Because the reality is the producer is the first one on and the last one there. And you've got to see it through the entire time. And it's really only your will and passion and energy that makes this stuff happen.
Yeah, and I imagine there are
relate to that.
a gazillion hurdles from step A to step Z. So how does the process start? Someone comes to you with a script?
It can happen in any number of ways. I mean, people come to us with scripts. People come to us with an idea. We see an idea. Ender's Game was a book I read 20 years ago. My nephew gave it to me when he was in 6th grade, I think, and said, this is an awesome book, you got to read it. And I spent 14 years pursuing the rights to that book before we were able to make the movie. So, it happens in a variety of time frames and in a variety of ways.
And you have to keep the faith.
Yes, you do.
My gosh. Well, how much of your time would you say, if you could give me a percentage, is spent with the actors and directors versus how much time is spent with the investors and distributors?
Well, there's a whole slew of other people you're spending time with aside from those two groups. But I would say that you are spending less time with directors and actors. The reality is, it's kind of funny. If you laid out on a timeline a film, the actual film from the beginning to the very end, the production piece of it is really small. And the production piece of it versus the post-production or the pre-production. So the moment you're on set, unless it's a gigantic, $200 million film, it's pretty quick and pretty efficient, and it's a 35-day shoot, it's a 50-day shoot, and the life of the project is a year and a half. So yeah, it's kind of relatively short.
See, now I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, because really you know, but my guess here would be that it's short if you have good producers, because that means that everything is laid out and it can run as it should, and then you don't have to go into overtime, or you don't have things that fall apart and then you have extra production days. But the better the pre-thinking is, the better the producers have sort of done their job to make it all kind of come together, the tighter that production time is. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, look, even the best of us, and it's directors as well, you go into overtime. It just is what it is. And you have reshoots, and you get in the edit process, and you go, you know what? It would be great if we had this piece of the story, and we don't. So you do another day of shooting. So it's not, that's not the end of the world. And if you've prepped properly, you're prepared for it. It's when it all comes as a surprise and you're not prepared, and it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. So I would say prep is the most important thing you can give your project. And
do you kind of divide and conquer? Sometimes in the credits you'll see 6 producers on a film. So does everyone have their specialty and it's divide and conquer, or do you all mix it up?
Is it scrum? When it works well, and it doesn't always work well, all the producers, and there are many, because it actually does take a lot of people, producing people, to get these things done. Oftentimes there's way too many, and it doesn't take that many. But, usually there's a few that have played a key role. Mm-hmm. And I think, personally, you have to be really self-aware what your piece of the project is, and then execute on that for the betterment of the entire project. And I think there's a tendency to claim lots of territory or lots of credit or lots of things. But the reality is you play a specific role as a producer, even if you are really the one that is the lead producer. There's a particular role that you play. And I've always found that it works best when everybody kind of gets together in the beginning, is like, okay, this is my role. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what you're going to do. And here's how we're all going to communicate. And then it can be very effective. It sometimes is not effective.
So I imagine there's a range of egos that work together.
Yes, there is a range of egos. And I have found as I get older that when you find the people that you can really navigate that stuff with well, you stick with them. You
want to do it again and again with that team.
Yeah.
Well, lay out for me, what are some of the things that can go wrong?
Oh my God. It's the things you didn't think about that always go wrong.
Sure.
When you
like
plan
life.
for everything. Right, exactly. We could be here for weeks outlining what could go wrong. Everything can go wrong. But the key is how you deal with those things calmly and effectively and quickly, because the clock is always ticking. And it's expensive, and you've got to keep moving. I mean, sometimes just a decision is the best thing to do, because sometimes there isn't necessarily a right decision, but a decision is better.
I always say a body in motion stays in motion. And if you just keep one foot in front of the other, and on some days those footsteps are really tiny, but if you just kind of keep that ball in play, you somehow get through it, in theory.
Yeah, well, I have had the pleasure a couple times in my life of climbing mountains, and I find it to be a really good way to think about exactly what it is we do, which is, sometimes you can't look at where you have to get to. You just look down and put one foot in front of the other, and you'll get there. And it'll take a while, and it may be painful, but you'll get there.
And it's amazing. I'd love your perspective on this. I'm talking specifically regarding movies, but, I guess it applies to life as well. Does money help? And what I mean by that is I've seen some terrific movies, particularly here now at the Chicago International Film Festival, independent movies, the tiniest of budgets. Now, granted, they're calling in every favor they've ever had, and you can't do that on every movie. So at some point, you can no longer ask for favors and you have to start paying for things. But I've seen some incredible movies on tiny budgets, and I've seen some really big budget things just make me scratch my head and think, now, what happened here? So is money always the answer?
No, absolutely not. You are 100% correct. And I think oftentimes, and the really good directors, they chafe and it's frustrating, and their job is to fight for every resource they can get. So that's right. But when you finally get to the point and you're like, look, this is what we have and what we can do, then it becomes solve the problem, and it gets more creative and it gets more interesting. I mean, to me, one of the greatest examples of that was when we were shooting the film Rosewater, and we were in Jordan, and it was Ramadan, and it was hot, and it was hard, and Jon Stewart was making his first movie. And there's an example of what can go wrong. Everything can go wrong, because everything did go wrong.
And you're in Jordan. So.
Everything went wrong. And on one particular day, everything went wrong that day. And Jon, who is really an incredible person and smart and terrific, and Jon called us all together, and basically everyone started complaining about the lack of resource. And Jon said, stop, everybody stop. We all know what we have. That's never been a secret. We just got to make it work. And frankly, all the money in the world wouldn't have solved the following 4 problems that happened today. So that was a great example of how we had real limited resource, but we actually solved a lot of problems.
Yeah, sometimes lack of money really forces creativity.
Absolutely.
And so that can have, not always, but it can have a great result. But it's true what you say. You really have to have a personality to roll with the punches if you're going to be a producer and if you're going to be any sort of director working on a tiny budget. I'm wondering now, you've been doing this since 2001. Is any of this instinctual? And what I mean by that is, can you look at a script and be like, that's it, folks, this one is a winner? Or do you just never know until the end?
You know, it's so hard, especially at the script, right? So you fall in love with the script. I once saw a great cartoon that I've lost over time, and I loved it so much. But it was, the first cell was as the script called for it, and it was a picture of a tree with a tire hanging from a rope. Very simple. And then you went through each cell, and it was as the art director directed it, as the DP lit it, and it went on and on and on and on. And at the end, it was a stump with a rope in the corner, and it was totally different. And that's absolutely true. And I think one of the great challenges of what we do is it's such an enormously collaborative effort. You have the template, and you try the best you can to get from that template to the final piece that you're all happy with. And all the difficulties and challenges along the way then influence what that original template looked like. And sometimes it's better. Sometimes you miss the mark, but in really good ways. And sometimes you realize, usually in post, like, wow, why did we spend 2 days shooting that scene? It was very clear that was never going to be in this movie. So it's a journey. I mean, it's truly a journey.
Yes, and that's why I mentioned a little bit earlier, to me it's also a leap of faith, because you try through that very long process of staying as true to the vision as possible. And of course, life thwarts you as you move along. You know, I'm wondering again, since I had mentioned you'd done this since 2001, and this is a people business, what have you learned that is common among people now that you've worked with so many?
The desire to whine. We all whine.
Oh, dear.
What is common amongst all of us? I think people, especially in our industry, in the end of the industry where you're actually making the movie, so the people on set, are incredible. And that's, to me, what is so much fun about what we do. The craftsmen that you encounter, whether it's the props or the set or the costumes, all the different pieces, the camera department, the DP, the way they rig to set lights, everybody, frankly, is a real artist. And it's wonderful to get a rhythm and a group working together in a really functional and terrific way. It's really hard what we all do, and everyone knows it, and everybody's done it a bunch of times, and we sign up to do it again, and it's a very collaborative effort. So that's the piece of it I truly love the most.
Yes, and I think it's that collaborative effort that also makes it so hard. As you said, everybody wants to feel valued.
Yeah,
it's true.
So true. So true. Especially producers, we're the most beleaguered bunch. You get no credit. If it doesn't go well, you get the blame. You got to have a really solid ego in check when you're producing.
Yeah, because producers take the punches.
Totally. And it's never about you when it works, and it's always about you when it doesn't.
Right. Scapegoat
it's
you.
Tough. Exactly. It's tough. Well, I think we should have a self-help group. We don't get together enough.
Now there's an idea. Yeah. Now that'll take off. I'm not kidding. I'll join. So you're in town. Well, I guess, as you said, you live here. I think of you as being L.A. and coming back to Chicago to visit, but it's the other way around, man.
Yeah, I visit L.A. Okay. I visit L.A. more and more these days because our kids are off in their own lives. But I am a Chicagoan, and I love being a Chicagoan. That won't change.
Well, so then I won't say you're back for the Chicago International Film Festival. I will say you are here, as always, for the Chicago
Correct.
International Film Festival. Talk to me a little bit about the changing industry that we have going on now. One, in Chicago, just how we're growing. And it seems from my little standpoint that we're growing quite well. But also about the movie industry as a whole, as people consume media completely differently than ever before.
Yeah. It's interesting. I go to a number of film festivals during the year, and you see the film festivals, including Chicago, changing, which is great, with the times. I think Toronto added a TV section this year, and so they're highlighting TV and episodic. Sundance has a big push on what they call New Frontiers, which is virtual reality and augmented reality programming. So, and I think with the addition in Chicago of Industry Days, which is really smart because we need to educate the folks in Chicago, both consumers and our industry, around what we do and who we are and who's here and who's doing what. So I think it's terrific.
Yeah, I see our film community really growing, but just like everybody else, I'm sort of waiting to see how it all shakes out for consumption of media. So one of the things I found on my tiny little project, The Dinner Party, is that it exists on multiple platforms. I'm sort of covering all my bases. It's a live event. It's a live streaming thing that you can take on the go. It's an edited down later for cable. It's also this, spin-off podcast, just because people are all over the place. No one sits down to watch a movie really anymore. And certainly television is that way. No one sits down at 8 o'clock because Brady Bunch is on. I'm dating myself, but something good is on.
Well, that's the beauty of film festivals, though, because they bring people to the movies, and they bring the movies here that we wouldn't necessarily find. And so I think it's really important that film festivals flourish in all kinds of places because I saw a film last night that was fantastic, that I loved, that I don't know if I would have seen. So,
what did you see?
I saw Brooklyn. It's really good.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
I really liked it.
On my list.
And so I think that, I think it's great because it is the landscape of consumption is changing. And I'm not sure it's going to shake out per se so much as it's going to evolve over a long period of time here. And I think that it's important that we have movies. And, some stories should be told over 15 episodes and some should be told in an hour and a half. And there's a lot of ways to tell stories. To me, fundamentally, I view myself as a story person. And so I'm fairly agnostic as to whether we're telling it digitally or it's being broadcast or it's in a theater. That, to me, isn't really the driver. The driver's the story, and then what's the best way to get that story out?
Yeah, I think that's beautiful what you say, because I think storytelling connects us. And in that way, filmmaking is so very important. Is that why you started in 2000? Well, I guess you'd been making films before you started Oddlot Entertainment, but is that what drew you to producing films?
It's funny. I think, and I talk to my kids about this a lot, I don't think going forward in your journey whether it all makes sense. Some people construct their lives differently, and, some people head towards something and they know that's where they're going to go. Me, I did not. I had no clue. And it wasn't until at some point I kind of turned around and looked backwards and thought, oh, it all actually did connect. It all kind of made sense in a weird way. And my journey was really around story. I started in anthropology, and I lived overseas for a year, and my thesis was about storytelling and cultural transmission through stories. And then after that, I had this extraordinary professor who said, you should go to film school, don't get a master's in anthropology, which was mind-boggling to me. And so I listened and I took his advice and I went to film school, which was so not in the plan. And it was an extraordinary experience that totally opened my eyes. And then I started going down the film route, and I do live theater as well. So, yeah, I guess when I look backwards, it was all about story and stories fascinated me. I as a kid, I'm the youngest of 5. And I didn't get much airtime at the dinner table. So I made up stories. I made up a whole world that I used to tell my family stories about this whole world. So looking backwards, yeah, I think it was always story for me.
I love what you say, because it's amazing how one person can affect someone else's life so dramatically. One of the things I love to ask as we kind of wrap up our podcast here, we are, of course, on the dinner party. So you have worked with so many people, and I'm wondering, living or dead, who would you have at your dinner party?
Oh, I should have anticipated this one. Shoot. That was so
no
bad.
Pressure, no pressure.
Yeah.
You can tweet me later.
There's a lot of people. So I always wanted to make a movie like David Lean would make. So I would love to have him at the dinner party. I was fascinated with Dostoevsky. So if he could come, that would be awesome.
That's a good one.
I would have a dinner party of probably 8, no more. And I have to get back to you on who the other 6 would be.
You've probably already worked with him. I'm sorry if I don't know this fact. If you have, maybe you'll clue me in. I've always wanted to have Martin Scorsese.
Yeah,
at my dinner party.
Awesome, right?
Yeah.
No, I've never had the pleasure of working with him.
Oh, my God.
But he's incredible.
Of course.
And not just the films he's made, which are unbelievable,
right,
but the work he's done in restoration, the film historian that he is.
Yes,
I mean,
right.
Yeah. Okay, we'll put him at
Okay,
you can come
fine,
too.
fine. He actually did my very favorite movie of all movies, and most people don't know this movie, Kundun.
Oh, yeah, I know that movie well.
What a beautiful
Gorgeous.
movie.
Gorgeous.
And so your interest in anthropology, maybe it's something that you've
Yeah, and I lived in
liked.
Nepal, and I actually started the Tibetan Resettlement Project in Chicago many, many years ago with a friend of mine. So we resettled 150 Tibetans from Nepal and India and Tibet.
Fascinating. So the many sides of Gigi Pritzker. So here we have it. Well, thank you for speaking with me. I really appreciate it. I could not send you away without having some sweets. Now, I know that some days are sweets days and some days we sort of take a pass. But I just want to tell you, just in case to tempt you, this is what we have if you want to take it with you. You have almond pear coffee cake. So just if you're in the mood, I'll send you with a little to-go package.
Well, this has been a real gas, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining me on the Dinner Party Podcast on WGNplus.com. I'm Elysabeth Alfano. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DinnerPartyCHGO and at WGN Radio and on Facebook at The Dinner Party and at Elysabeth Alfano. To subscribe to this podcast, find The Dinner Party on iTunes and SoundCloud. And if you want to send me an email about today's podcast or anything else, find all my info at thedinnerparty.tv. The Dinner Party producer is Michael Heidemann, and the original music is by the Websters. Thanks for listening today, and join me on the next Dinner Party podcast, where the best conversations happen over dinner.